Hello, everyone. My name is Jess Pilo, and I am the host for the Masters of Percussion webinar series created by H3 Collective. This series is comprised of 4 live webinar sessions taking place each Saturday in July 2020 from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Zoom and Facebook Live. I am joined today by the artists of the Masters of Percussion webinar series who will share more about this virtual event. Welcome, Kevin Fell, the Program Director of H3 Collective, who specializes in arts and education. Welcome, Mark Sepik, an artist specializing in upcycled instruments. And welcome, Derek Thorne, an artist specializing in Afro-Cuban drumming. Now, our first question is for Kevin. Kevin, what inspired you to create the Masters of Percussion event? And adding to that, what was the motivation behind applying for the Animating Toronto Parks grant?
It just seemed like a fantastic opportunity as an artist to be able to play in a public space such as the parks. We all know that the parks are kind of the heart of many of our communities, and they're a place where people can go and meet, where families can go and be together. And originally the program was entitled Simonier, which means we are one, to kind of reflect this, that this park was at the heart of our community. And with COVID, it just underscored that notion that really we are one, and that the ability to work together and be together and live and play together is really important for our own well-being. So we took the program online, and that obviously changed what we were able to do, but it didn't change our intention. Our intention really was to work with the community to use a platform or a space to help further thought and connection and well-being within that community. So for those reasons, it aligned very well with our artistic practices and the origins of the art that we're presenting. African art is done in community, for community, by community, and so it just seemed to be a really great fit for us.
Thank you, Kevin. Now this next question is for Mark. The Masters of Percussion event was originally scheduled to take place at Fountainhead Park in Toronto before the pandemic as a way to animate the park with art. What do you think is the impact of art in public space?
I think the first and most important impact of art in the public space is to make it free and available for everyone, rather than going to somewhere specialized, which usually includes paying an admission fee, whether a museum or an art gallery or a concert, and having to travel to those places as well. When it's in a public space where people go to anyway, and to bring art to the people that way, it breaks down all the barriers, and we're all just hanging out like friends and neighbors, or friends we haven't met yet, and get to have the best of both worlds. High quality art of any kind, as well as just community fellowship and warmth, and all the special, spontaneous, serendipitous things that can happen in public space, like maybe a plane will fly overhead and it might be right in tune with the low conga. Or a dog might bark and it might be right in tune with the trumpet. Anyway, just to have art touch the people, and the people interact with the art in all kinds of ways. It's blessed and integrated and for everyone.
Now, our next question is for Kevin. We've just heard from one of our artists about art in public space. Now, how did you decide which performers you wanted to showcase in this series?
Well, I've had the great fortune of being able to work with incredible musicians and people. over the last 10 years in my journey in arts and education. And, it was a matter of marrying the community and the artists. Like Mark said, what made sense? So who is living in this area, in this community? What is their interest? And it just so happened that artists that I knew, Amadou Kinu, who's a griot and master drummer from Burkina Faso, who's not on this call but who's part of our series, Mark Sepik, Derek Thorne. They were all people that whose work fit in really, really well with the Fountainhead Park community. And then we had the blessing of being able to create a partnership with Rise Edutainment. And Rise Edutainment is an organization that works in community to help develop the work of artists, which is in line with the kind of work we wanted to do. And they've done a beautiful job of putting forward artists that just complement and enrich the program that we were presenting. And I think what I've discovered through doing this program is that the response from the community has been very generous and quite incredible in the way that they've reached out to the artists, the interaction between the artists and the community and local business as well. So it's definitely helped to build bridges and definitely helped to serve that purpose of developing our work with one another.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next question is for Derek. Derek, how has your experience been in changing your original programming, which would have been a live performance at Fountainhead Park, to a digital experience instead?
Well, I had to pivot along with with all the other musicians in my community. The vast majority of us, and of musicians that I work with for years, we do our work live. And of course, live music is cancelled until further notice all across the board. So it was a question of, two real things. Basically rearranging my space, the space that I normally practice in, for a live presentation, which means, for example, deciding where my camera would be and then moving all the clutter that's normally in that space on the other side of where that camera is going to be, and also technically, in terms of the sound. In a practice space, you're not too worried about acoustics and that sort of thing. But when your practice space now is not simply about, an audience of yourself, paying attention to your own technique and your own ear, but now your audience is, the audience that you would have had before in a live venue where a sound technician would have been setting things up and mixing everything. Now I am that sound technician. I am that guy doing the mixing. I am also the guy that has to do a bit of sound treatment in that space so that, you don't hear for example, a whole lot of reverb from the snare drum that's sitting in the corner, or that might be coming from, the vent directly above where I'm playing, that sort of thing. It meant that, I had to learn a lot pretty quickly about a few technical things, like setting up microphones and mixing and whatnot, and a few practical things as well, like making a space presentable visually, from a certain angle, as opposed to making it presentable visually to myself from where I'm sitting practicing.
Thank you, Derek. Now, this next question is for Kevin. There are many implications for marginalized communities who are facing the COVID-19 pandemic. As a collective, we have chosen to integrate food insecurity and the support of local businesses into the programming. Why was it important to H3 Collective to address such a complex issue as part of the event?
This just seemed like a no-brainer, really. The pandemic has been so different for everybody. I think everybody's encountered it in a different way. And the session that I do, the webinar session that I do, is called Living with Rhythm, and it really looks at sort of aspects of well-being and how a lot of my techniques for well-being have been taught to me through learning percussion, through learning how to play instruments, through music, through dance, and all the cultural underpinnings of these arts. And it's just the idea that nothing exists in isolation. The community park doesn't exist in isolation from community business, and neither does art, and neither do the homes there. They're all interdependent on one another. And it was in getting to know the community, it was wonderful to see this interrelationship that was already existing. Deb's Roti and Doubles, who have sponsored a voucher for as a giveaway, is an example where they're a business in the community where whenever there's something going on, they have contributed or donated to that initiative. It's a difficult time for people, and so whether it's the actual food that's making a difference in someone's life, or whether it's the gesture of support, or both, I think, Canadians, in my experience, and this community especially, is a generous one, and are finding whatever means at their disposal to help one another, keep their spirits high, and also meet their needs. And this is what art does for me. It feeds, my soul, and it also gives me very practical solutions for living. So when we look at sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need all of those things to support one another to exist. And I think this is the question, the larger question for art in society. Where does it fit in as we move forward, through this pandemic? And I think there's value in valuing one another.
This next question is for Derek. Derek, will your personal work as a musician change after participating in the webinar series? For example, might you offer virtual lessons or other digital content now that you've seen this virtual format in action?
The question of teaching, for example, is a question that every single musician, is constantly asking and answering. Some musicians decide that they will incorporate teaching as part of their career, and others decide no, they're going to stick to live and studio, or one or the other. And now, it's this time, it's in having to adjust for the times that we're in. The answer is going to have to be, I am going to definitely incorporate things like online teaching, online classes, that sort of thing into my work. Musicians that I have known and worked with before, who do teach, some of them have done this sort of thing already, especially if we're talking about world music musicians, who don't originate in this part of the world, or in this country. They might be from the Middle East, or they might be from Europe, or wherever have you. They might have had students that in those other parts of the world, or they might have a teacher who still lives in that part of the world, and they want to maintain that relationship with those students or with those teachers, and so now they have to do it virtually, in addition to building their clientele in their new country, in their new home. They continue doing lessons over Skype or whatever have you. That in itself is not a new thing, but it is going to become a new thing for a lot of us, and it's going to be definitely one of the new things that I'm going to be doing, for sure.
On this note of virtual learning, let's go back to Kevin for a moment. How will the programming for H3 Collective change in the future based on the success of the webinar series that we've experienced so far this summer?
Oh, I mean, riffing off what Derek said, it's a huge pivot to take an ensemble of live performers who are planning to be inspired by nature and bring that outdoor experience indoors, for one thing. So now we're dealing with technology, and how do we make that connection to the park and to the community and to nature? And like Derek said, now we're working in isolation and we're talking to a camera, and I mean, these are entirely different experiences. However, it also has created enormous opportunities because we have people, tuning in from the UK, from the States, from different places around the world, from South Africa. We're able to share the work that we're doing online after the event. We've had over 5,000 engagements. We've seen people, this has gone, in all different directions around the globe. Who knows how long it'll be used for and what benefit it may bring. So going forward, absolutely, I think I look forward to performing in a park setting and to enrich and enhance that experience by providing online content that you can have different conversations, and like Derek said as well, and besides from some of the benefits that Mark expressed, we can also take a moment to maybe go a little deeper, teach a little further, share a little bit more with one another online. One of our objectives that we were really hoping to meet when we wanted to perform in the park was to create a space where there was a conversation between ourselves and the audience, that the audience were as much participants as they were audience, and a lot of the online tools that we're using allow that to happen in a different way, through Q&A or through people connecting with you afterwards, through calling you or following up with you or inviting you into their schools or into their homes. So it's a different experience, but it's definitely one that I would pursue in the future going forward.
Now, this next question is for Mark. Mark, you are already offering live performances on Facebook each week. Do you think our online engagement will continue even when we can all be together again in a public space for a live performance?
Well, even though, as we have, all been acknowledging that we're having so many online experiences because of necessity, again, as Kevin was saying, that the online situation, allows for, more communication between the performers and the audience, either, during the show with, subscripts, or after with, different modes of communication on and off screen. Once we get back to normal, and who knows how long that's going to take, on the way to getting back to normal, we're going to, now we're having, socially distanced public gatherings increasing in number, and so we will, go back to live performances, but that's going to take a lot of time, and they're going to be compromised by, common sense safety, social separation. So I think we're going to have to accept this hybrid world henceforth. Who knows for how long, but it's going to take a long time before things get back to the way they were. That's if they ever do. So I think indefinitely we've got a hybrid universe now, and there are so many benefits, as we've all shared. So when things get to normal, I'm going to keep on giving online presentations, just for the greater reach. And, as that's wonderful to learn that, we had thousands of engagements so far. And for myself, normally my live performance experiences were, educational concerts, or occasionally on a big public stage, a big concert hall, but not so many. And sometimes when I'd be playing, other than festivals or clubs, I would rent a concert hall, and I'd be under pressure to sell tickets just so I wouldn't lose my shirt. And in the end, I would usually sell out, and people would be turned away, but they wouldn't buy the tickets until the last minute, and I'd be so stressed, and then wind up just gasping for relief because I was sold out and turning people away. And that's great, but the stress for the months beforehand is, big. So But the first time I did one of these online concerts, maybe 3 days before, I sent out some messages on my Facebook page, and I had like 1,500 views in my first gig. People, my relatives in Italy, in England, friends in Singapore, in the States, of course, all over Canada. And so it's just so encouraging. It's mind-blowing the kind of reach that you can have with just a little bit of effort and some clicking.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Mark. Kevin, this next question is for you. What obstacles did you face in putting this event together in the wake of COVID-19? And adding to that, how did the support of the Fountainhead community and other partner organizations help build your vision and maybe help overcome these obstacles?
Wow, there's a lot in there. I think we had a lot of support from the Fountainhead Park community, the city councilor Anthony Perusa. We were in conversation with their office, initially talking about providing food in the park for people, and just to spread the word. We started looking at where are the places where people connect in this community other than the park. Whether it's a local store or the councilor's office or in the schools or. So we look to those people to teach us, who lives here, what's important to you, how can we turn this platform over to you so that it can be used to the betterment of your community. That was the approach. So really the community has informed everything we've been doing. And I'd say the biggest challenge was, right when COVID hit, the realization that the park was going to be closed, that the permits wouldn't be issued, and that everything would have to be taken online. We were presented with a choice of whether we wanted to sort of kibosh the whole thing and just wait, or whether we wanted to do something online. And so that meant, reaching out and seeing how well positioned each one of the partners were. And within our community, who has access to computers? Do they know how to use the platforms we'll be using? What are the accessibility issues? So safety and accessibility went from being, how do people get to the park, be safe in the park, to how do people access us online and be safe online. And Jess, who's moderating this event, was a very big part of that. I had encountered Jess in another program and knew the work she was doing, learning how to use these online tools well in an accessible and safe way. And so that's why Jess was brought on board. So yeah, it definitely took us time to stop and to refocus the conversation and to reach out to all the partners again and say, how does this work for you? Is it going to work for you? And then find a way forward together.
Well, thank you for those kind words, Kevin. We do have one final question for you. We've already had 2 outstanding webinars, the first on July 4th with Amadou Kianu on West African percussion, and then on July 11th with Derek Thorne, who has joined us today, and Derek showcased Afro-Cuban drumming. What is next in the webinar series?
The last session is a session that I'm going to be leading, looking at wellness. And, very quickly, the one thing I'll say about that is the question I've been asked over and over again is, how is life going to change going forward? Well, I think that's up to us. And I think, some of the values and the ideas that we've been sharing through this series are some of the strings that I'd like to pull together in that conversation. And it's a chance for us to decide what we want to keep and how we want to live moving forward. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of the time that we have together.
Well, thank you, Kevin, Mark, and Derek for your time today. Now, this webinar series is a free event in partnership with Arts in the Parks and the Toronto Arts Council. And we are so thankful for their support. And you can register for the upcoming webinar at mastersofpercussion.eventbrite.ca. And you can also watch the previous sessions on our Facebook page at Collective H3 or at hoza.ca. That's HOZA.ca/masters. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you at our next webinar session.